And we do a fun little clap thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll lead the way. Aaron.
That was aggressive. You don't need to go that aggressive.
That's good.
Will that work? Okay.
Yeah. Remember last time we were like, I wonder if multiple claps helps. One for one. It syncs all together. I think it's all the high peaks.
Yeah.
It's easier to grab onto. So
okay, cool.
There we go.
Cool. Jesse, welcome to the show. How are you doing today? You're just getting over COVID. That sucks.
I know. It really does. But you know what? I'm finally seeing the end of it, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. Well, you're a trooper for being here. We appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah.
Right off the bat, how do you pave a path in an industry when you don't feel like you can relate to anyone? Saw your your first pinned profile post on your Instagram where you mentioned how you felt kind of both unworthy and incapable.
Mm-hmm.
And what a topic to get into, because I feel like whether we sometimes have those thoughts screaming at us, or whether they're kind of more covert and hidden, I feel like we can all deal with that from time to time. And just back to my original question, how do you pave a path in an industry when you don't feel like you can relate to anyone?
Honestly, a lot of it has to do with moving forward with feeling and self-confidence. I feel like a lot of that, it's a lot of balance, right? And I think being open about it helps, because a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people feel the same way, but they're scared to talk about it. And so for me personally, my story is, I wanted to pursue a creative path. I've been a creative my whole life, ever since I was a little girl. But honestly, once I started looking online, I never saw anybody who looked like me successful. And so for me, it wasn't, my question wasn't, can I do this? Was I capable of it? I knew I was. It was, can I be successful because of, the way I looked? I never saw anyone online that looked like me that was successful. And so it's just kind of going with it, just doing it and trial and error, and just getting feedback. So
when you say look like you, are you, just to clarify for listeners, what are you referring to?
Well, it's not just physical. I'm Latin. I'm a first-generation Mexican-American woman. And so dark-haired, dark skin, bilingual, Spanish and English, but also my background. Both my parents work in factories, and my dad's, he has second grade education. And so I don't have that. I don't have a lot of people that I can relate to, or that they talk about their background that I can relate to. And so I like to show, where I came from, how I grew up, my upbringing, and then my current journey on trying to, quote unquote, make it in this industry, whatever that means, right? Because everyone's success is different.
Yeah, well, before I ask more questions, what's making it to you?
Well, for me, I think, honestly, it's just making a good living out of it, being able to do what I like to do. And that's just being creative, whether that is photography or content creation, or even working as a freelancer, right? Because I feel like another big conversation that a lot of people, I feel like, don't have is the difference between a content creator and a photographer. That line gets blurred really often online. And so for the longest time, I had this crisis identity of, am I a photographer or am I a content creator? What am I? And I kept going back and forth. And so I rather be a photographer. I've worked with clients, cabins, brands, but at the same time, when I post my things online, I start to blur into the content creator, part of me. And especially when I started sharing more of my background and my journey of trying to pursue a creative career. And so, but I think that, nowadays, it's okay if both of them are joined, because again, I think there needs to be more diverse voices in the outdoor creative space.
Right. Just backpedaling a bit too, you mentioned Your father had a second grade education.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, because I can see what you're saying, your potential, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying when you're looking around and you're seeing nobody who's kind of in the position that you want to get to, it's tough to, I guess, imagine yourself getting there, and you have doubts and you question if what you're doing is silly, if it's even possible.
Exactly.
How do you get out of that bubble?
Well,
In
it's
your
funny.
experience, all you can share is your experience, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, honestly, it's just, I think for me, it's been honing in on my craft. I have learned how to take photographs. I have learned how to create videos. I have learned all of these things. Every time I have worked with clients, um, they have given me positive feedback. And so for me, getting out of that bubble is just honing in on that craft. Not only, um, you know, talking about my story, but actually being able to show that I can do the work, and that for me inspires me that I can do it. And so it's kind of a weird mental game, to be quite honest with you. There's not really an answer for that. It's just kind of a journey that whenever I do feel like I can't do it, I just kind of have to shut those voices and those thoughts and just go for it. Experiment, fail, and try again and get feedback. And yeah, I mean, it's really hard. And I think that that's why there's not a firm answer, because it's something I'm still currently working through.
Right.
But I just continue on. I mean, that's kind of how I move forward. I hope that I answered the question.
Well, it's sometimes questions like this are tough to put into words. It sounds what you mentioned, and I want to kind of highlight for listeners too, is that I think you mentioned at the very beginning, is that people tell me I do a good job, and it's one of those things where no matter how many times you do a great job, there's still that little, are you good enough?
Yeah.
Are you good enough? Right. And what you're talking about is really honing in on and really, I guess, focusing intensely on that feedback as a mechanism to say, as a validator in a good way. Right? Routinely, people are telling me I do a good job. It's almost like a constant reminder to ourselves that others are vocally telling us that we are capable. And if you continually remind, this is why I tell people, you need to write down on paper or in a Google Doc a stack of proof of the things you've done that you are who you say you are. Because then when you go back and you read it, those voices in your head can't compete. Those negative voices, it becomes inarguable that you are a competent, skilled, and capable person.
Exactly. And yeah, I feel like that in itself does answer a lot. I mean, yeah, like I said, it's still a journey, honestly. I mean, that's why I love talking about this, because not a lot of people do. And I know a lot of people feel this way, because I have from people from my own community that reach out and say, thank you for sharing so and so, or talking about this, like that post that you were talking about earlier. Yeah, a lot of people, when you think about the outdoor adventure space, you don't think of a Latin American woman. You think of something else. And I feel like anytime I have worked with brands or anything like that, I always choose models. I try to be intentional about the models that I choose to be inclusive and diverse, because we do need a lot more of that. And if you don't see yourself, when you see more of your people like yourself online, you feel less invincible and you feel more capable. And that's the message that I'm just trying to share.
Yeah, Aaron, one more question, then I'll let you hop in, because I know you're festering. And
yeah, I am.
I know you are.
Me be quiet.
Yeah, I know. I'm throwing it out there that I'm conscious of it. I'm visually.
I gotta tell you, I'm enjoying your voice.
Yeah,
so
the sick voice.
Just keep it going.
The sick voice. How low can we go?
Talk closer to the mic.
Well, Jesse, why do you think you post a piece of content or a photo where you're talking about not feeling like you can relate to people or whatever topic. And it's amazing how many people come crawling out of their shell and into the comments mentioning, I'm so glad you talked about this. And I feel like you're like, where did this come from? I didn't know this many people were feeling this way. Why do you feel like people don't want to talk about it? Do you think it's because, is it the classic case of everyone needing to be amazing and epic online? Is that what it is? Or is it something else?
I think it's a little bit of two things. One being, and I can speak to this for myself, I'm not going to lie, for the longest time, I held back. And one of the reasons is because I felt like I wasn't worthy of being the person to talk about, or one of many, right? And I felt like I still have so much to learn myself that sometimes I never felt good enough to speak on the topic. And so, it's a little scary to put yourself on this pedestal and have people asking you questions. And you just hope you say the right things as far as for the community and the people you're trying to represent and give voice to. And and then second is it's uncomfortable. Anytime you share anything vulnerable about yourself, you're putting yourself out there on the internet where, of course, it's the scary internet. People can say anything. And I have had, quote unquote trolls and haters. But at the same time, it is me, and it is something that I feel passionate about. And I think that it's important to just speak on. And so I think that that's why a lot of people don't speak on it. But if they see somebody speaking on it, it empowers them that it's okay. And it gives them a little bit courage for them to start stepping up as well.
Yeah. You're talking about speaking on people feel like they need to be an expert on something before that they can share.
Exactly.
I feel like, and that's not true. It's better to say, here's what I'm learning versus here's what I'm sure of.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's the whole, I'm not an expert on it. I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think I'm worthy to speak on whatever topic it is, whether it is, speaking on diversity in the outdoor creative space or something else, is like photography, right? I am a photographer myself and I work with clients, and I've had people come to me for photography advice, but of course, I feel hesitant to give the advice myself because I'm still learning on myself. And so it's one of those things where it's always a little scary to speak on whatever topic it is, especially if you're still learning on yourself. But at the same time, you're on the journey and you're a lot, 2 steps forward than maybe the next person behind you. And so it's just one of those things that comes with online community. So
Aaron, I pause.
Yeah. Well, I've been listening a lot, and I love it all. Just observing and listening. There's a good proportion of things that you're saying that are coming from within. Like I think, or I feel this way, so I'm curious in terms of the battle that we all have, where there's a proportion of things that are made up in our own heads or we're worried about in our own heads versus reality. And then you post something. Is there support with your post as well? You did just mention some trolls. I was wondering, my question was going to be, how many actual obstacles have you come up against versus the fear of like, I'm in uncharted territory, but it's been pretty supportive versus I'm in uncharted territory and everyone wants me to sink the ship. So I was just curious in terms of our own brains, like this is the mindset, the photographer's mindset. And a lot of times our own brains hold us back from reaching or taking that leap or doing things. I'm not asking for necessarily like a percentage, but do you feel like there is a learning curve as you go? Like, oh, I was so scared, but it was only 50% of what I was afraid of, or 20% of what I was afraid of. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I hear you. I would say that since I've started sharing and being more open and vulnerable online, I've gotten a lot more support than I thought. And a lot of people, I have a lot of people that actually relate, whether they are of the same background as myself, but or not, they all relate in some way or another. And so it may not be, for example, my Latin background, but it may come from a female background. Because again, I had a friend not too long ago tell me that she was on Instagram and she was searching, on the people you may know. She was going through the people that she can follow, and most of the photographers were white men. And so she was trying to look for a female photographer. And so that was just one aspect of how she can relate to me. But yeah, for the most part, I've gotten mostly positive feedback. A lot of people are really happy that I am speaking on this. I've had brands talk to me and tell me that they are really trying to be more inclusive and diverse. I think that's just the space that we're trying to move into. So, yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah, that answers it. And I think that is absolutely true. And Seth and I have run into that with companies we've worked with too. Like it's a huge push for diverse clients and all people, really, not
Yeah,
just
exactly.
supermodels that are using their stuff, but a widespread of everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone is purchasing these things. They want to promote to everyone. Everyone deserves a chance to be, part of the story, I think is how they would say it. So definitely we've seen that as well. So in your journey, I guess my next question would be, now that I'm up, I'm taking over. Seth can rest his voice. My next question would be, how fast does confidence build in this journey? How fast does your security with self, your ability to see like, oh, I do have a voice and I can do this, how quickly does that take to build? And are you still do you feel like you have ways to go? Do you feel like you're running at full tilt? Where are you in that process? As I'm sure it's been an evolving process.
Yeah, it has been. Honestly, I think that confidence comes with more experience and just more of putting yourself out there. Of course, I feel more confident now because I'm speaking on it than I was when I started about 4 years ago. And I think that surrounding yourself with other people that you can have those safe spaces to talk about and having them hear you, like, for example, this podcast. And that's why I'm very grateful to have this conversation with you guys. And that's what gives me confidence, because people care. People want to listen. And I think that with time, the more that I continue my journey, my creative journey, the more people ask questions, the more I talk about it, that confidence is just going to build and build and build. And there's not really a percentage or a time frame that you can put on when you can get confident. Just like with anything, when you first start photography, you're not confident in the beginning because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what questions to ask. It's not until you finally start playing with the craft, you start asking the right questions, you start hearing the right conversations, that's when your confidence starts to build. Yeah, I think that's kind of been my journey and how my confidence has been growing. Am I still in the journey of trying to build my confidence? Absolutely. I think that happens whether you're beginning or whether you're quote unquote super advanced, whatever that means. And so, yeah, I think that it's just important to just put yourself out there and just experiment and have those conversations with the people who care to hear and to listen.
Yeah.
You mentioned,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks. You mentioned not knowing to ask the right questions, right?
Yeah.
When you're starting out. In hindsight, what are some questions you wish you knew the answer to sooner in this industry?
Oh
I mean,
man.
I'm realizing that, and you know what? This is super. Speaking on relatability, I think these conversations are much more effective, these podcasts, when we're talking to people like yourself who are in the middle of the trail as opposed to on the mountain peak.
Yes.
If that makes sense. So when I ask this question, I realize there's always still so much to learn.
Yes.
But I'm curious, in your opinion, those right questions, knowing to ask those right questions, what are some of those in hindsight you wish you had known sooner, if you could have as a beginner?
Oh man. Oh gosh. I mean, oh man, putting me
Putting
on
you
the
on the spot a bit.
now. Yeah.
Well, maybe not even a specific question. Maybe
Yeah.
just a topic you wish you had known more on right off the bat. Is that easier?
It is easier. I guess if I wanted to start with the basic question is, why is it important, right? Why is it important to talk about this? And for me, it's I felt very intimidated to even explore. I didn't start exploring the outdoors until I was 25. I didn't start camping until I was 25. And it's because I didn't think, and a lot of it I can say comes from culture, right? There wasn't a lot of camping and outdoorsy whatever in the Mexican culture, and I never even thought of recreating outside because I didn't see more people of my culture being out there. And so why does it matter? It's because there are people in either my culture or other cultures that want to be outside or even want to be a photographer, be in the creative space. That's not really a career that's very much, advocated for in the culture. And I think that all these kind of conversations, it's important to talk about. And I think one of the questions is, why it's important is because people do want to do this. And so I don't know, I guess, yeah, I think that's why, because there's other people that want to do it. And whenever, I don't even know how to answer this, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, I would say that that's one of the questions that I would start with.
I also kind of want to make note of this. I feel like on this topic, when you're talking about or lack of representation or what have you, I think people sometimes get defensive and assume that you're blaming people, right? Or you're angry about this. As opposed to, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It just sounds like, hey, like I just would love to see more people represented that others can relate to, like myself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Like I don't hear a lot of hostility in your voice, like they're not representing us and all this stuff, which I feel like people can jump to that conclusion very quickly, that just because you're saying all this stuff, it means you're pissed off or angry.
No, there's no anger, resentment, anything like that. I mean, truly, I don't think anyone does this intentionally. I think it's just something that...
Right. The polarity is scary though, right? Like it can head that direction quickly.
Yeah. I don't think that those conversations, just like this one, I feel like if there is that hostile conversation, it's hard to bring a message forward. And I think that whenever you do have an important message that you feel you want to share, it's important to talk about it in a calm and also just respectful manner, right? Because you guys have questions, you guys don't understand, and I have questions, I don't understand. So I think that whenever you aren't hostile, you can have those safe conversations. You feel like you have a safe space where you can have ask the questions that you want and bring awareness to the topic.
Well, let me ask one right now that it's not maybe controversial, or because in an effort to help me understand this, like you just said.
Yeah.
So let's take company X, right? And 90% of their customers, let's say, are white guys. And let's say they decide that for their marketing campaign, 90% of their models in their apparel will be representative of their clients. I see how that makes sense, but I also see from your point of view, how it would continue to limit exposure to maybe peoples of other culture who would otherwise want to be interested in that recreational activity or that piece of apparel. Do you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like a paradox.
Yeah.
Where it may not make sense to represent with models in this situation in apparel because that's not the customer, but at the same time, we want to get more of those people into this Am I making sense? And what do you think of that?
I think that maybe that's why your customer isn't of that look, because they're not seeing themselves there. They don't think that they even belong in that space, if that makes sense. Because that's how I felt. It wasn't until finally I saw people that looked like me being represented in these magazines and these ads, whatever it may be, that I was like, oh, hey, I feel like I kind of belong in here. I kind of want to do this. And so, in this X brand, it's white males, but maybe they don't have other, male color there because they haven't provided a sense of safe space for these men to be part of
identity,
this.
right?
Yes. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. It's just, that, that concept or paradox has always perplexed me.
Yeah.
And I guess the only, I'm someone who likes to be able to see measurable results like data. So I'm wondering if these companies, and I hope maybe somebody has insight on this, to see if those campaigns that are more inclusive do bring more people to to the whatever they're advertising. If it's camping gear, more people are camping. I don't know how you measure that. Maybe somebody knows, but I'd just be curious to see to see the effect that it has.
I'm sure it does.
I would love to see that. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm not saying it does. I would love to see it. It'd be interesting.
I'm sure it feeds the whole cycle of it. I mean, I can think of a brand. I have no ties to them. I just like them. Faraday is a brand who their clothing, they have like middle-aged models, and I'm middle-aged myself. And it goes, your brain just goes like, oh, that would work for me. Right?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
So it just does click. And then you look into it. Now there's an affiliation like, oh, they're putting their clothes on 45-year-old men.
Exactly.
I'm getting that to that point. Like that fits me. I'm not out of my league wearing that. I'm not trying to be a 20-year-old wearing that. Like this is what it's intended for.
Right.
And I can see that with race or ethnicity as well. For companies though that are branching out, like you said, 90%, let's say they have 100 customers, just to make simple math. They could have 200 customers and maybe the percent goes down, but now you've added a whole new group or multiple groups, but just making simple math, you've added one more group. Now you have 200 customers and it's 50-50, but you've just expanded that would be my argument is like,
right.
Yeah, you're marketing really well to this one group, but there's lots of groups. Well, there's lots of different kinds of people. So why don't you do the same thing to all these people, and then you're going to have that much more sales?
Yes.
Right.
And I would also add to that, a brand, thinking about a brand, sure, we can talk about a clothing, right? Like a clothing brand. And so it's not just about the clothing. And that's what I think I'm trying to touch on is that brand and representing more people. That brand represents an industry. It's an outdoor industry. And so that just provides a safe space for other people being able to see themselves, being able to be part of this industry, being able to go hiking, camping, whatever it may be. And so this brand with the clothing is just one piece of the puzzle. But if more brands are able to represent, then it's just this industry as a whole is just more inviting to whatever.
That's what I was going to say. I would almost call it an invitation rather than a safe space and use the word inviting right there. Like, hey, come hang out. You're welcome. You know?
But it shows it begs the question of how powerful marketing is.
Oh gosh, yes.
And, I mean, this is a whole different episode, but in terms of, I don't have cable TV, but when I watch TV, I'm always like blown away at the fast food commercials. Get this, and then the medicine commercials right after it, and it's like it's just crazy. And then depending on what you're watching, like you could look better, you could be younger, you could have more hair, you could use this makeup, you could like just sort of you're not enough stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
That is the marketing that really hits people. And if you just watch a little bit of TV, you're going to see those commercials where essentially the statement is like, you're not enough, but if you get this, you'll be happy, you'll be great, you'll be this. So I do think in one's like this is a personal journey for you as well to build the self-esteem or the security of like, no, I'm good. Like I can do these things despite of what marketing says.
Mm-hmm.
And then one step further, let me try to enlighten some people or show everyone that I can do this.
Yep.
But there is that like you have to, I think the message too for people is the overcoming of the self-doubt that is either targeted or targeted by proxy throughout culture, throughout marketing, throughout advertising, that like, nah, this isn't for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and getting past that and being like, no, I'd like to try that, and I'm gonna succeed at it. And this is my battle, not people inviting me. Like, I don't need your invite to go camping. I can do this on my own.
Right. Exactly. I love that. And yeah, I mean, you kind of hit it on the head right there. And I know that, and one thing that I do want to, say is I also don't want to be a number to meet a quota, if that makes sense. And that's why I felt very hesitant to talk about it in the beginning, because I led with my work first.
Mm-hmm.
And now I feel like I can talk about it because I have proved myself through my clients and doing good work that I can lead with just work without talking about this whole, right, like diversity, inclusivity. But I can be a photographer without having to put like, oh, I'm a female Latin American photographer. No, I'm a photographer, period.
Right. So you don't want to leverage that.
Exactly. And so that's why I honed in on my craft. And I continuously am on the journey of learning how to be a better photographer, how to be a better content creator. And that way I can have my work speak for itself. And then, of course, my other part of me being a female Latin photographer is just another piece to the puzzle. So that was one thing that I remember in the beginning I was very hesitant to talk about, because I didn't want to just be another number or meeting a quota.
I'm so glad you said that, because what you're talking about is meritocracy, right? Where you're hired on merit, and that's how it should always be.
Yes.
But what you're talking about is hire me on merit, but let's get more people in the space.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I agree with you. I think when you try to just hit a quota, I think quality suffers.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right? Which is unfortunate.
Yeah. And so I do my part to try to learn more, just gain my technical skills in photography, just try to be a good photographer. And if someone hires me for example, like a cabin shoot, I know that I can show up and do the work and show you quality work and deliver work. And of course, if they hire me because of other things, whether I was a Latin photographer and they want to represent more of that in the space, great, that's awesome. But I know that I can also give you awesome work. And so it's it's that balance that I'm always kind of playing around with. And so,
so you almost want to hear, you're an awesome photographer, content creator, we'd love to hire you. It's a bonus that you're a Latin woman, as opposed to, oh yeah, for sure, we definitely need more Latin women.
Exactly.
Like you want to hear that first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I understand that, because I mean, just being hired as a quota, that wouldn't feel very good.
No, because that doesn't really speak to my work. That just speaks to me and, you know, how I look and what I talk about.
Well,
But
and you look the way you look. I mean, there's no effort in that. There's effort in honing your craft and getting better. And
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
So I hear you. I hear you 100%.
Yeah.
Seth, if you think there's no effort in the way I look, I'll tell you my
the way
regime.
you're born. You want to get so specific.
I'll tell you my skin regime.
Yeah. I've seen it. We're just in Alaska. I've seen it.
Splash of water in the morning.
He went outside, grabbed some silt from the glacier, and just exfoliated for 30 minutes. So, man, we got to get going.
I swear men's skin are so different than women's skin.
It's filled with dirt and grime. And
maybe it's just how we're marketed to, right?
I think, do you want to hear my crazy conspiracy theory on that?
Oh, here we go.
Let's hear it.
On what?
Whoa. On that, like women's skin and men's skin, very different. The amount of attention needed, I would say.
Okay.
But I think it is. I remember being a teen and having my first pimples, and I would use the oxy pads. Remember those?
Yeah.
And it made me break out so much worse. And I was like,
even more.
Oh, well, this is convenient. Like now I need more oxy pads. Like I just think there's something to less is more. And you put all this product on, and like this product will fix that thing, and this product will fix that thing, and this product will fix that thing. And like you just at some point, like what's the baseline? And we get lost in the weeds. Whereas not all, but guys, I think typically are like, oh, I forgot to wash my hair this whole week. Like, like they're just kind of, I'm stereotyping, but just a little bit like, like, do you wash your face at night? What? No, I don't know. If I feel sweaty, I might put a splash of water on my face, but that's it. And they have perfect skin. And you're like, what the hell? I don't know. There might be something to that. It's a theory. It's out there. You guys weigh in. Let me know. Put it in the comments.
I don't know. I feel weathered and I don't have a skincare routine. So,
well, you look great for 29, 30.
Yeah.
30.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
I'm turning 32, I think. I don't even remember. August 1st. So I'm pretty excited. How old? 32.
Nice.
Congrats. You guys have made it.
Just getting started. Rewinding.
I digress.
So, yeah, you big time. Do you ever? So back to this whole being vulnerable and being honest online in particular. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about how that does so much for your viewers. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that's aided in building your audience, right? Mm-hmm. I would say so. I mean, one of the things.
Yeah.
So selfishly, how does being honest and vulnerable, what does that do for you personally on a selfish level when you're talking about it? I mean, is it in the satisfaction that people are relating, that you are helping, or is there another factor to it?
Honestly, selfishly, as you would put it.
Is that too harsh?
No, not at all.
That word gets a bad rap. It's okay to be selfish sometimes. Definitely.
I agree. I would say, and this is going to sound terrible, but...
Oh, then say it. That's good.
Do it. We're recording. Press record, Seth.
It's meeting more people like me, selfishly. I grew up in a very white neighborhood, and I never really had friends of color. And now that I'm in the creative outdoor space, even less now. I mean, unfortunately, I live in Colorado, and it's rare to find someone of my a Latin, outdoorsy woman that's also into photography and wants to go out and shoot sometimes and maybe go camping and rugged. It's hard. It's hard to find somebody like that. So selfishly, sharing this, I have found I've connected with other women who are the same, Latin, outdoorsy, and also in photography. So I've gained a couple of friends that obviously they're not in Colorado, but it's been nice to connect with somebody and make online friends like that. So that's my selfishly answer.
Okay. On that topic, can I ask, I'm going to ask, I don't know, I'm asking for permission. So
Canadian.
This is our show.
Do you mind if I
do you mind if I ask you a question on our podcast?
On this podcast that asks questions
I realized
and
how
interviews?
stupid that was as soon as I said it. Don't worry, it didn't get by me.
We do what we want, Seth.
We do what we want. Okay, so why is that important that you go out hiking with another Latin woman as opposed to just any other friend?
That's a good question. I've thought about this a lot, actually, funny enough. It's kind of a weird question to even think about for me because...
I thought you were just going to say, that's a pretty weird question. You should have. It would have been funnier.
I mean, honestly, I think it's the cultural thing. There's always some jokes, some phrases that you can say that just mean differently in a different culture. My husband is Norwegian, for example, and even that he has some phrases or some words even that you can't really translate it in English. And so it kind of stays in the Norwegian culture. And so sometimes, for example, I'll say something, and if I get scared, I automatically start speaking in Spanish. If I get angry, I automatically start speaking in Spanish.
Oh, God. When you get angry.
Yes, my Latin woman, Jessica, comes out.
Oh.
What's that called? Say that again.
Jessica? It's just my name in Spanish.
Oh.
Jessica.
I was like, oh, what's this mean? Latin women?
Well, we haven't been cursed at in Spanish yet, so we're doing all right, folks.
I have.
Have you?
Oh, man. He must have done something
not by Jesse here.
No.
Not by Jesse.
No.
But anyway, so yeah, it's just some of those things where sometimes you think of a joke or a phrase that you want to say, but then you have to go through this whole explanation and this is what this means. And it means differently in Spanish, for example. And I can give you an example. My parents say this saying in Spanish called apachurrar oreja, which means I'm going to go squish ear. And what that means, they're going to go to bed.
Squish ear. That's amazing.
Squish ear.
Yeah. So it sounds funny in English and it just doesn't translate correctly. But that's an example of what I'm trying to say. It's just there's certain phrases that sometimes just don't.
So now, is that a Latina, like, so you're Mexican, you said, would a Costa Rican know that phrase? Would a Colombian know that phrase?
It's Spanish, so they know, but they wouldn't know the context behind it. Mm-hmm. And that might just be a saying that my parents say. Who knows, right?
It's just your parents. I just Googled it. No one's ever said that ever. So
that might actually be the case, to be quite honest.
I like that, though. I'm going to go squish an ear. I'm going to start saying that. 100%.
It's funny. You squish your ear when you sleep.
It makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. There's just certain sayings that, I have hiked with Latin women before, even Latin men. And there's just some things that you just start speaking in Spanglish and it's funny. It's little things like that, some unspoken things that it's just a different experience, I would say. And so I love all my friends, obviously, but it's just a different experience. And that's the only reason why I
would imagine there's like an undescribable comfort.
Yes.
Like just kind of, I grew up in like an all white town in Connecticut. My sister's adopted from South Korea, and I could always tell, like, one of a few Asian girls growing up, like it just probably just didn't quite click,
Yeah.
And her finding like her friends in college and living in Chicago now.
Nice.
I just think like you grow into it, but I just can imagine like that time and finding just some sort of unspoken comfort with like, they get where I come from. They get my idiosyncrasies a little bit better than the average person.
Yeah. Exactly.
What you're talking about is a need to be understood. I mean, that's why photographers like hanging out with other photographers. That's like why people who run like hanging out with other people who run, because people get it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. you don't have to explain it. You can just say something and they know exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
And so that's why, sometimes I have, saw out, even not even Mexican, like it can be just any immigrant, or I've hiked with many other cultured background hikers, and it's kind of the same thing. It's a different upbringing, coming from immigrant parents than not, I would say. And again, it's hard to pick the words because you obviously don't want to offend anybody. But that's
You
just
can
kind of,
offend people if you want on our show.
That's
It's
up to
okay.
that's up to them.
yeah, that's true.
You kind of have a point. When you get offended, I guess, I mean, there's certain things that are off limits, obviously. But when you get offended, I mean, you've given somebody else the power in a sense,
Yeah. Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I kind of digress there, but it's an interesting topic.
Yeah.
I've heard that
No,
talked about on threads a lot when people are like venting about stuff.
Yeah.
I always comment, I say, hey, like, if it gets to you, they win.
Yes. Yeah. I like that. That's a
Yeah.
good one. It's always about, and they're just coming at it from their experience as well. We're all coming from it, different experiences. So they might be offended because, yeah, they had a certain experience. They have questions themselves that they haven't had answered, and
Mhm.
it's just so many factors to it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When you're offended, it's an opportunity to ask why and see the place in your heart that isn't quite healed yet,
Mm.
right? Like,
Mhm.
I think it's just a great time to pause if you get triggered or worked up by something and be like, why is this offending? Like, why is this getting to me so much? What part isn't healed?
Yeah.
What did they say that isn't healed? What thing did they trigger that isn't healed?
Yeah.
And kind of rework those things. Because ultimately, if you're really okay with life and yourself,
Mhm.
you understand that everyone's different and people are going to say stuff. And if they're just saying stuff, it's words. It's
It's
like
weird.
then our choice to be like, hey, you can or cannot say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Well, what you're
know?
talking about too, right? You're saying there's a part of you that's unhealed. And I always take the standpoint of, if you're, usually when we're offended, we're angry, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I always say this on the show, anger, is fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're angry about something, you're afraid of something. If you're angry, you dropped all the plates in a restaurant, you're afraid of looking stupid.
Yeah.
You're afraid of being humiliated.
Yeah.
If you're, let's say somebody corrects you in a sentence, even unsolicited advice, even though you shouldn't do that, and you're angry about it, maybe you're afraid you don't know as much as you thought you do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's an interesting. So I like what you're saying, Aaron, too, and I also think it's, what am I fearful of in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. No, that's good. I like that. So whoever gets offended, I'm sorry. But
Preemptively sorry.
Do
yeah.
you even need to be sorry though? Right? Like, I don't know. We're
I'm
getting
sorry
Yeah.
really,
you got offended.
getting really into the weeds. Let's bring it back to creating. So,
Yeah.
have you ever kind of had to refine your way back to creating, if that makes sense? I mean,
What
I
do you
feel
mean by
like,
that?
how can we get back to focusing simply on creating good stuff and blocking out a lot of the noise?
Oh man.
Again,
Simply
I'm not nominating you as the expert, but in
yeah.
past experience, I mean, have you ever just been like, you know what, I'm not really heading the direction I want to go. I need to get back to making, good stuff.
Yeah. I think it's shutting out, honestly, is taking a step away. Anytime I have felt like I wasn't creating the stuff that I want to create, it's because I was too consumed into social media. I started to create what other people wanted or what other people were creating, and not really tapping into what actually made me want to create in the first place. And I'm going through that a little bit right now. And I've had to take a step back and really refine what I actually want to spend time creating. What do I want to learn to create? I mentioned that I like photographing, but what is that I like photographing? And so I think that getting back to creating what you want and creating good stuff is just something that comes from authenticity and from what brings you joy. Um, yeah, I think that whenever you do get too consumed into the social media, you start to question everything that you're doing, and you start to forget about why you even did it in the first place. And so that's one thing that I've done anytime I feel like I am not creating what I like. I take a week off, I take 2 weeks off, whatever it may be, maybe even just a weekend, unplug and get out my camera and just play with it and see where it takes me and where that joy, where that joy leads me. And that's where I feel like I create my best work.
Right on.
It's awesome. From this episode, something's really hit me where, first of all, you have a really nice way about presenting the message that you're going for.
Oh,
It's
thank
not you need to, or you guys should do this, or it's not pushy in its own sense. There is a strong theme of like, this has been my personal journey,
you.
that things I needed to get over. And by
Yeah.
me getting over them, I hope to help other people, and not in a pushy way, but in a way where they can see some of my successes or some of the hurdles or some of the obstacles that I've gotten through. In this entire interview, there's been no real strong stories of people saying you cannot go camping, you're not
Right.
allowed to go camping. It's been you fighting customs or cultural norms or societal norms or things that you haven't seen or do see or whatever, and getting over that yourself and breaking through those barriers that maybe are somewhat self-created or culturally created, and getting through those things. And I could be wrong. There might have been opportunities or people talk down to you because of ethnicity or whatever, because you're camping, or Mexican women don't camp. Like, I don't know if any of that's happened, but that hasn't been the theme of this podcast. It's been sort of like your interpretation of the external world and fixing the internal world to get past it. And I think if there's 1,000 ways we can take this message, and you don't have to be Mexican out there listening to relate. You could be anything. You could be me, that sometimes feels like I'm too old to be doing this. This is like a kid's game at some point. I have those thoughts, and I fight with those thoughts often. And it's easy to scapegoat things in terms of like, oh, I didn't get that cabin gig because I'm not a 25-year-old anymore. I'm 43. Like, that's why. Versus like, no, I want to keep working on my craft and get better. And like, maybe that's just not the right cabin for me to shoot, or the right product for me to shoot. That's not what they're looking for. Whatever. It has nothing to do with my work. I need to keep doing my work better. So I think there's just a lot of messages in the internal sort of evaluation of where we are and where we want to be, and fighting through some of those external messagings that we get, whether it's straight up marketing, advertising, our family, our parents, our grandparents, culturally, religion, like whatever those things are that we want to like kind of bust through. It comes from within. That's what I really got from this. And thank you for sharing. It's like, it's helped me in my own way, in a different way, but my own way.
I love that. Mic drop, first of all.
That was really good, man.
Can't drop it. Sorry, Seth. He does the
No,
audio.
that was great. I love that. I mean, well said, honestly. And that is why I feel like it's important, no matter what you're talking about, in just sharing your vulnerability and your struggles, and the fact that you're still in it, right? Because Seth, you were saying earlier, I'm in my journey right now versus the quote unquote mountain peak. And I think that I was really excited to come on here because I'm very much still on that journey, climbing that mountain, if you will. And a lot of people do relate to that because once you're at a certain level, whatever that may be, it's not relatable anymore. I feel like whenever you do, you can't just share your journey when you're right in it. You're learning, you're struggling, you have some wins, you have some failures. It's relatable to everyone, right, on different aspects. And so that's why I'm really excited that you took from that, Aaron.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Definitely.
Awesome.
Thank
Well,
you.
Jesse, thanks so much for your time today. This was awesome. Awesome to get to chat with you. And thank you so much for your time. Really
You
do
as
appreciate
well.
it.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. I love your podcast. I'm always listening. I'm always learning.
Listener turn guest. How about that?
Wow.
Hell yeah.
Not only a member.
Yeah, listener turn guest. We love that. It doesn't happen too often, but it does.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So,
I'm really excited.
right on. Okay, till next time, both of you.
Thank you.
Yes. Take care.